The year is 480 BC. Persia is the world's only superpower, having expanded their rule across much of the Middle East, Asia, and the Mediterranean. King Darius tried to conquer the Greeks 10 years earlier, but was defeated at the Battle of Marathon. Now his son, King Xerxes, raises the largest army in history to bring the Greeks to heel. The Persian Empire began at Lycia. It quickly conquered Egypt and into Asia. These wide-open lands lent themselves well to their cavalry-based maneuver warfare, and the Persians were known for their expert horsemen and light infantry. This was a far cry from the Greek style of tight phalanx-based, heavily armored warfare. King Xerxes, the son of Darius, leads his people against the Greeks. King Leonidas, meaning lion's son, leads the Greek response. The Spartans were the most fearsome of the Greek city-states, and as such were chosen to lead the coalition's army. The Spartan Council of Elders refused to support the war, however, due to statedly religious observances, but more likely due to isolationism. One thing to consider here is that the Spartans neither liked nor were liked by the other cities. There was also the practical concern of all their slaves called helots. Sending a large army far away would be inviting a slave revolt, so Leonidas led his 300 bodyguards and their slaves on a walk to Thermopylae, where they took command of the Greek force. Approaching the pass from the other side is the largest army ever assembled at the time. Estimates vary wildly, but approximately 150,000 Persians marched to meet the 7,000 Greek defenders. Armament. The Greek hoplites fielded long spears and short swords. The Persians had a mismatch of weapons. Advantage, Greeks. Defenses. The hoplites wore metal armor head to toe and had a large metal shield. The Persians wore cloth and wicker. The Spartans also had fortifications. Decisive advantage to the Greeks. Utility. The Greeks had short supply lines. The Persians relied on pre-placed food caches, and with a massive army to feed, could not play the waiting game and must attack or starve. The Greeks arrived first and set to work rebuilding an old defensive wall constructed at the pass previously. As the Persians arrived, the Greeks went out building campfires to kick up as much smoke and light as possible to conceal their numbers. For the next 4 days, the Persians would send forward scouts and emissaries, at first thinking the Greek force was a joke or a negotiation tactic. It was not until the 5th day of their arrival that the assault began. The first day of fighting went well for the Greeks. Xerxes sent forward his weakest and most expendable forces. By the end of the day, only a few Greeks were killed, but tens of thousands of Persians had died. Crashing against the disciplined shield line with their lightly armored force was not working for the Persians, and they could not leverage their exceptional cavalry or numbers due to the tight beach battlefield. Fighting from atop the small wall the Greeks had constructed, they were almost unassailable. They stabbed down and mercilessly killed any Persian who tried to scramble up the wall. The pass was also narrow enough that the Greeks could have units in reserve, resting, then rotate out as the front units got tired. The Persians unleashed tens of thousands of arrows, but the light arrows against Greek armor were ineffective. On the second day, the situation repeated itself until Xerxes sent in his elite immortals, so named because when one would die, another would immediately be promoted to replace him. After a bit of a clash with them, the Greeks pulled a fast one. They feigned retreat, falling back in lockstep. When the immortals broke their formation and darted after them, the Greeks suddenly reformed into a solid wall and cut down the now spread out Persians. While the Greeks suffered more losses than the first day, the Persians lost another 10,000 or so men. This simply wasn't working. The Persians had to find a way to leverage their numbers, and one soon presented itself. Ephialtes, a Greek farmer, revealed the location of a narrow mountain pass the Persians could use to bypass Thermopylae. The pass was guarded by Phoenicians. As the Persians approached, they withdrew to the high ground and made ready for battle. However, the Persians ignored them and made their way through the pass. In the morning, the Greeks would face assault from both sides, allowing the Persians to leverage their superior numbers. The Greeks had two choices: retreat or stay and die. The bulk of the Greeks retreated. However, some 1,500 men chose to stay. This may have been due to a sense of duty, but there was also a practical reason. Remember how I said the Persians had exceptional cavalry? Well, if they were allowed through the pass, they would be able to run down the retreating Greeks, so a rearguard was necessary to delay them a day and allow the retreating Greeks to slip away. This selfless sacrifice, led by the 300 Spartans, would become something of a myth, but it was also a necessity to save the rest of the army rather than some grand gesture of defiance. The third day came and the Greeks attacked, determined to kill as many Persians as possible before they were surrounded. While there was one hell of a fight, they all died, killed by Persian sword and arrows. The Persians now advanced towards Athens and burned it to the ground. While Persian occupation would last a year, they were finally driven from Greece following the battles of Plataea and Macao.